Welcome to the Bibbidi Bobbidi Basics podcast, a lifestyle podcast with a magical twist. I'm your host, Caitlin May, and I'm a self-proclaimed Disney adult and childless millennial who is obsessed with Harry Potter, Florida Sunshine, and all things basic. Here on the podcast, I chat weekly about everything Disney, Harry Potter, theme park news, and navigating my basic late 20s life. Hello, Magical Basics. Welcome back to the pod. I hope you're having a great week so far. I can't even comprehend the fact that we are already done with March. Like, what even is 2022? I feel like every year flies by, but this one just feels like it is zooming past us. But this week, we are not going to have a broadcast. I am actually in Washington, D.C. this week at work. So yes, hello, welcome to my busy season. Things are really ramping up. So that means we are going to take our end of season break pretty soon. But this week, our episode is a very fun one. It is an extension of last week's episode. So it'll be the second part of Phil's interview. Phill had such an amazing interview that we just didn't want to edit anything out. So I hope you enjoy the second part of his interview. Be sure to check out his Instagram and his music. All of that is linked down below in the show notes or in the description box, depending on where you are listening. But thank you so much for supporting this pod. I had the best time with Phill interviewing him for season 3. So after our word from our sponsor, let's get on into his episode. Hello, Magical Basics. Have you been thinking about starting your own podcast, but you don't really know where to begin? I completely understand. Because when Bibbidi Bobbidi Basics first launched, I felt the same exact way. Thank goodness I had Anchor to help me. If you've never heard of Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. I know what you're thinking. Katie, is it really that easy? Oh, it is. So let me tell you how. First, it's completely free. We love that. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And then Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's literally everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you so much to Anchor for sponsoring this episode. I'm very excited for you being the Tron fan that you are because yes. Tron is actually coming to Orlando from Shanghai.
Yes.
How does that make your heart feel?
Very, very happy. I was really excited when they announced they were building it in Shanghai. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, Disney's actually acknowledging Tron. Mm-hmm. So like there was just that base level of excitement that comes anytime they show anything Tron related on like anything. I remember when the Disney Plus trailers were like airing and they were still like struggling to get all the like streaming rights back from things. So they only had so many things they could show as coming.
Yeah.
And a couple of those things, you know, were like Tron. I'm like, oh, thank God they're acknowledging it. But then, of course, there was also they got to have content to fill this out. So surely that means they're doing a Tron thing.
Right.
And then it turns out they were, but then decided they were not going to anymore, which at this point, that is just the story of my life as a Tron fan. Them deciding that they're going to do a Tron thing and then not doing it.
Right.
But when I saw they were doing the roller coaster, at first I'm like, oh, they're doing a roller coaster? Like, they can't do like a Star Tour simulator thing? Because I'm not a big roller coaster person. And I actually have a great story about how not a thrill ride person I am about Tower of Terror.
Oh, I hate that ride. That ride triggers me.
that is a whole separate thing that I will not let myself go on a rabbit trail on.
That could be a bonus episode.
Oh yeah, that could be like a whole like thing on its own.
We just gather. It's like Tower of Terror Anonymous, where it's just like we gather people who have had traumatic experiences on that ride, and we just have therapy on the podcast about it.
My thing is that I love Twilight Zone as like a show.
Yeah.
And I loved the theming of the ride.
Mm-hmm.
The actual ride itself, what it is just everything that my brain is afraid of.
Yep, same.
Because I hate falling from high distances. And so yeah.
I'm like scared of real elevators.
Right.
Like, why am I going to get on a ride that simulates a broken one?
Right. Yeah, that was exactly the thing. Yeah. But I was like, bummed when it was a roller coaster. And then I was like, oh, you ride on a light cycle through the grid. I'm like, okay, I want to ride that now.
You're like, dang it.
And then the ride video came out and I went, oh, I want to ride it real bad. I want to ride it. But then also the nerd in me is excited because like that means they're gonna have Tron merch again, and I don't have to scrounge eBay and Etsy for Tron things, which my wife has been really great. She manages to find like great things on Etsy to give me as Tron gifts. But yeah, just anytime Disney acknowledges that they have Tron, I get excited.
It's like a little blessing from heaven.
Right.
Like, yes, thank you.
Right. And then they said they were building a Tron roller coaster in Orlando, and I went, yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Technology of the ride. First of all, Shanghai is just such an impressive park in general because of the technology and innovation that they bring to that park. Yeah. And I feel like the Tron coaster was one of those first ones that really put Shanghai on the map for being innovative in the rides that they come up with and design. And so when it got released that they were putting it here in Orlando, I was like, okay, this is pretty dope. Like, I'm not even a Tron fan, and I'm like psyched to ride this ride because it looks so cool.
Well, and what's great about it is they put the Tron coaster there in Shanghai because they needed like they have like their version of Tomorrowland, but they needed a Space Mountain equivalent. Like they needed a version of Space Mountain. Right. But the retrofuturism of all the other versions of Space Mountain didn't fit the forward direction they were trying to go. Right. So they did a Tron ride, and then like China, like Tron played really well there. Yeah. So like they just kind of meshed the two together, and then I guess it did well enough to where they're like, we're gonna put it in Orlando, next to actual Space Mountain, which is one of my favorite rides at Disney World, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I feel like Tron was the perfect thing to add to Tomorrowland. I think it's gonna be the best segue into like what like the Tomorrowland of our kids are gonna have, you know, because like the Tomorrowland that exists now is very much like our parents' generation and then us growing up in it, and now you walk through it and you're like, okay, this technology is like 30 years old, like you know,
it does have a charm to it. It
does have,
absolutely. I enjoy the retro. Yeah. I legitimately thought this might have been the first time we fight.
No. I am not bashing Tomorrowland at all, but it definitely needs to celebrate the technology that we've innovated, but also like have that, because Walt always had this like forward way of thinking. Like he was always thinking about like, I mean, he literally built a carousel about progress. Like he was always thinking about progress and like us like building amazing things for the generations to come after it. And so I think Tron is a really great first addition to like the future of Tomorrowland. Yeah. And I think Shanghai will continue to play such a big part in like the new, because I mean the trackless system that is Rise and Ratatouille now. Like that's all out of Shanghai as well. So we're starting to see that more and more as like we get new rides, and even with the new Guardians ride, like that innovation as well. So
that's another ride I'm excited about, which is really funny.
Yes. Oh my gosh, they just announced. I'm not a roller coaster person. They just announced that it opens Memorial Day weekend.
Ooh.
So that's soon. That's May.
Yeah. I'm very excited about that. But at the same time, I also hate that, again, a ride I'm really excited about is a roller coaster.
Yeah,
and not only is this one a roller coaster, this one like spins and like moves around.
It
and I'm like,
spins 360 on its axis. And then it's also claiming to be the largest indoor roller coaster. So I'm really sorry for that loss for you.
It's like, cool, great, thanks. I mean, I'm gonna like it,
You're
but
like, you shouldn't have.
I'm gonna like it, but I also know that I'm fully expecting that both of these rides, I'm gonna ride them once and be happy for the rest of my life that I got to ride a Guardians ride and a Tron ride, and then probably never partake in them again.
Rip. I hate that. You know what? I'm choosing to believe that they're gonna change your life. And
I honestly am optimistic about it.
Yeah. So, I would love to know just what is it about Tron that, because like a lot of episodes, and you've said you've listened to a couple, and I always like to ask, like, what is it about Disney do you think resonates with so many people? And you can kind of answer that part of the question as well, but I would love to know just your personal like story of like, what is it about Tron that resonates so much with you?
And they both actually do tie together. I think for me, Disney movies always were a source of escapism. You know, like healthy escapism. Like, you know, as a kid having a hard day, you know, like you come home, like had a hard day at school. Oh, well, I can put on Toy Story, and then, you know, it just like changes my imagination to where as a kid I was legitimately nervous to leave my toys alone, because I'm like, what if they get come alive and then don't come back? And just having that escapism, but I think also like just representing pure imagination and thinking outside of the box. And that's something that that Disney pushes even outside of the movies. Like the Imagineers, I love reading about Imagineering and the Imagineers and everything that they do, and just like how it is working there, because they are also constantly thinking outside of the box. Like even more recently with the Spider-Man animatronic that is like this fully detached animatronic that can do all of these
it's just
flips.
Scaling the wall in California Adventure.
And like all of these things, and just seeing how the ideas grow, where it's just like, okay, can we make a stick flip? Can we make a wider stick flip? And just thinking outside of the box and having to just address these unconventional problems. And I think Tron Legacy especially touched that part of my brain that just like loves sci-fi, and I had just gotten into Daft Punk before then. So whenever they announced that Daft Punk was doing the score, that like I did not have a lot of like my own money at that point because I didn't have a job and all that, but that was the first album, anything that I had ever pre-ordered without hearing a single note of it. Because I'm just like, it's Daft Punk, and they had it's gonna
be dope.
It's gonna be great. And it was like they had this pre-order package where you got like a full like movie poster size poster of Daft Punk. Cool. As they appear in Tron Legacy, because they have like a little cameo in the club.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. And it touched like my inner 6-year-old because it glows in the dark.
Wait, I love that. Amazing. Daft Punk just sends me to another time. Like that, you saying that, I have not thought about them in so long.
Right. And just the movie itself, like, just took high school Phill to just a place where that he had never been before, that I'd never seen before, and just seeing it unfold like that. And it was when 3D movies were like a huge deal because Avatar had just done gangbusters.
Yeah.
And so they did Tron Legacy in 3D, and I remember it just being the most engaging movie experience for me in a theater, seeing that movie in 3D. Because there's a part where, for those of you, the vast majority probably,
I'm so sorry
who have not seen
perpetuating this,
who have not seen Tron Legacy, the idea, or Tron for that matter, the idea is that through one way or another, sci-fi hand wavy stuff, a human being ends up inside of a computer world, and there is like this whole other world that exists inside of a computer, like, and the people there are called programs, and they it actually was really forward thinking, because in the original movie the programs look like their creators. They look like they call them users. They look like they're users, and they are made up of all the bits of data about the use, like they resemble that because they pull all of the bits and data of their users from the system to make up this virtual digital existence, which is in a lot of ways what we have now with like social media presence and like leaving little bits of ourselves all over online. But this was like, this idea was put out in the 80s when many people didn't have a personal computer in their homes. Yeah. So a lot of it just kind of, went over people's heads. They're like, all right, yeah, computers, nerd stuff, I guess.
This will never be a thing.
Right. And then it became a thing. But so the concept of these movies is that one way or another, the main character is trapped inside this computer world and they have to escape. And so the world is very different. So there's a moment in Tron Legacy where the main character, Sam, he's like typing into the computer and accidentally activates the thing that digitizes him and puts him into the world of the grid, as they call it. And I remember in the theater watching it in 3D, he's like tapping away at it, and it hadn't been super 3D up until that point. There was actually a thing in the beginning going, hey, some of this isn't going to be super prominent 3D. Don't take your 3D glasses off. And there's a moment where like the thing activates and it digitizes him, and the whole scene like pixelates. And like it pops out like it's shooting into it, and that's the first time it's like really in 3D, and all the pixels like pop out and shoot back in, and he's digitized. So cool. And then there's this airship type thing. It's hard to explain if you haven't seen it. And honestly, it just sounds insane. It sounds insane. But it's like landing, and the big moment in this world is like the legs start like slowly coming out of the screen. But it wasn't like super gimmicky like a lot of 3D movies where they're like poking the finger out like, oh, hey, what's this? And the finger's like hovering around your face. Yeah. It really did just immerse you more into that.
I love that.
And it was nothing I had ever seen before. And the soundtrack was nothing I had heard before. And I had enjoyed listening to film music growing up. I was a nerd. I wasn't like allowed to listen to a lot of pop music and didn't really want to anyway. So I was a nerd in high school, and I listened to Blue Man Group and film scores. Which I'm sure the two of you, and especially Jonathan, know that might be one of the most Phill statements ever.
Jonathan's dying.
But I had listened to them and like thought they were cool. That's what I listened to. And like I was aware of film scores, but the Tron Legacy score just had this perfect blend of electronics and orchestra, and just the way they used themes musically, it just like latched into my brain. and made me realize that not only could film scores be cool, but it also made me go, well, I want to write music like that. I want to write music that sounds like that, that will tell a story, that will help take you to a different world and just immerse you into the story and give you a way to kind of forget about what's bothering you and like what's weighing you down for a bit and just take you to like a completely different place. And that's something that they do with Star Wars now as well. And in Tomorrowland, which I enjoy Tomorrowland as a movie, and I really love it. We actually have a tradition where we try to watch it at the beginning of every year.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Because it is just optimistic and hopeful and all that. It's just a great way to start the year off. I love that movie, but it is quite likely the reason why we're not getting a Tron 3 until like in the nearer future, because they are working on one.
Right.
But that movie also didn't do super well. So Disney was like, we're not going to do Tron 3 anymore. And then it wasn't long after that they bought Star Wars. So.
And that's been a great decision for them.
Right.
So.
That's been a great decision
really
for them.
That
and they're
one.
like, they're like, oh yeah, we don't need to do Tron. We have Star Wars.
We
don't need to do our own sci-fi, which is really funny because that was why they made Tron in the first place. Was because
to compete in that sci-fi market.
Right.
Yeah.
It was supposed to do that, and then it didn't. And so they didn't make a sequel for like 30 something years.
Yeah.
And then they didn't make didn't start actively making a sequel to that one for another like 12 years.
Yeah.
And
well,
which, I get it. We have Star Wars.
Cuz that's frustrating. I know that I would be upset if I was in a fandom and not getting the
honestly, the Tron fandom probably is one of the most chill fandoms ever.
They all have to be.
Because we have no expectations for anything. We're like, because Star Wars people are like, oh yeah, we want to see Grey Jedi. We want to see Thrawn. We want to see this person and that and that. And Tron people are like, we just want a third movie.
Tron people are like, if you guys sell a Tron branded shirt in your Tron gift shop, that would be great. Thank you.
We will be very happy about
in your
that.
debt forever. Thank you so much.
Because the Tron fandom just has no expectations, and because for whatever reason, the Tron the Tron Facebook page will still post stuff from time to time. And it'll just be like a clip from like just a picture from the movie and just like a comment. And all of the comments are like, Tron 3, make a Tron 3. Please make a Tron 3. Bring back Daft Punk. Which that was actually really, that was disappointing because they broke up last year. And so it's like, they're probably not coming back.
Oh, rip. I had no idea about that.
Well,
so
and
sad.
then, so like there is like overlap with the Daft Punk fandom and the Tron fandom.
And the
is
Tron
fandom are like,
it's like a Venn diagram.
We don't want much. Like... we just want more.
Oh no. I feel like though, listening to you like talk about Tron, like just makes me like, I've always thought Disney was so talented at reaching so many people and demographics and interests. And it's like listening to you talk about this section of Disney that I'm like totally inexperienced with just makes me like realize it even more, because I feel like Disney is you never uncover all of its layers. Like this is a whole subsection. Like I would consider myself a fairly hardcore Disney fan.
Right.
And this is like
you don't put a wall of mouse ears if you don't at least like it a little bit. So
you don't make it your whole personality trait. You don't move to Orlando if you don't like it at least a little bit.
You don't uproot your entire life and leave behind friends and things like that for something like, I enjoy it. It's cool.
But listening to hear you talk about it, it's like I'm realizing that there are whole subsections of people that Disney reaches based on their interests that I'm like, Disney's so big. Like, and it's so, I don't know. It's like Disney is so magical, but that's probably the most magical thing about it is that
Right.
it has that power to reach and resonate so
Right.
many people from
Right.
so many different perspectives, interests, walks of life.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. It really is interesting because I think, there are a lot of people like, oh, Disney's a mega company. And I also tend to be one of those people. It's like, we're all going to be owned by Disney someday. But also, I think you don't get there by doing something right. And then because you are that big, it does let you take the occasional risk whenever you think to.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, like, occasionally you can do a movie, a very, like, both of the movies were, in my opinion, groundbreaking because, like, the original set up, like, visual effects and artificial scenery.
Yeah.
And things like that. And the sequel, Tron Legacy, also, like, kind of pushed the boundary and actually started the current trend of the sequel reboots to nostalgic movies, which is really funny that it started with Tron, which is a movie that, a lot of people recognize the name, but didn't necessarily see it.
Right.
And then it started, like, a trend that is still happening now because we have, like, a Top Gun movie coming out eventually.
And then what's the one that you really like? With, I almost called him Han Solo. With Harrison Ford.
Oh, Blade Runner.
Yes, Blade Runner.
Yeah. Yeah, like...
Westworld.
Another
great
Westworld.
Example. Yeah.
Yeah, things like that came about because Disney was like, yeah, sure, we'll try that computer movie again and we'll hire
We'll take another stab at it.
We'll take another stab at it and we'll hire a guy who's done video game commercials and architecture to direct it. Oh, he wants to bring in Daft Punk? Sure, yeah, let him. And, oh, you want to do a young Jeff Bridges? Yeah, sure. Like, to, like, do it.
Yeah.
But then also, I don't know, there's part of me that is like, I don't know how close Disney, like, looked at the movie because it very much does not always feel like a Disney movie because Tron Legacy especially asked a lot of questions about philosophy and religion and, like, kind of challenges understanding of life. And there is a whole mess. Oh, dang it. I should have said Tron Legacy for what Disney movie has your favorite message. But again, I did that thing where I blanked on, like, every single Disney movie I'd ever seen.
Yeah, you can insert your statement now.
Editor's note, as artificially as possible, insert Tron Legacy over where I said Toy Story, and just Tron Legacy, like, over
give him a good couple sound bites of you saying Tron Legacy.
Tron Legacy definitely has the best message. And then we can... I heard John die a little. But it has, like, this whole message, and I don't want to ruin it. Not like it is a big major plot twist or anything, but I don't want to ruin the experience for anybody who might watch it for the first time
because they're inspired by this episode.
Maybe
me.
But there is a whole message about perfection and chasing perfection, and then it's not necessarily like a new message, like where you're chasing perfection and realizing that one, you're missing out on the actual important thing, but also realizing that, like, beauty and, in a way, perfection comes about from imperfection. That, if everything is perfect, you're just making copies, and then you don't have individuality. You don't have a podcast about Disney adults, or you don't have people who have, like, a partial wall of their music room with Tron stuff on it, wearing
composing
a Tron hoodie.
Sci-Fi.
Right. Right, you know,
music.
you
Yeah.
have all of the
Yeah.
blank slates without that, and it
Yeah.
really was just a really, because it came about like probably my junior year of high school at a time where you're kind of thinking ahead to what, you know, seriously considering what you want to do.
Yeah, and that's such
And
pivotal like stages in your like growth and development and like
right,
your worldview and
right,
yeah.
right, but it asked a lot of questions about, like, you know, how do we think about these things, but it, to some, a frustrating move, and then to others like an interesting move. They don't like fully answer with the movie's perspective on that. They
They leave
kind
it
of,
open-ended.
yeah, they leave it open-ended, and they kind of ask the question, and of, well, how would something like this reshape modern society and our understanding of science and religion? But then it doesn't answer it because you kind of fill in your own blanks of what you think it would be.
Right.
And like how your viewpoint of that, and then it like sparks conversations of, oh, well, how, like, what would you think if you found out somebody got trapped in a computer world?
Right.
Or how would something like that affect you and change you? And then like from there, it inspired me and a lot of other people to like, oh, well, why don't I make my own world? And for me, in the unnamed tabletop role-playing game that involves prisons and giant lizards, my group... Trademark. My group is actually being really cool with it. And they like Star Wars and sci-fi as well. They're being really cool with it. And I'm like, hey, what if I took like our adventuring party and I ran a game inspired by Tron, which is really difficult because this is a fantasy oriented game.
Right.
So bringing them into kind of a computer world.
Situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of an electronic situation type deal. And it has given me a chance to explore, like, well, what would my version of that look like?
Yeah.
And just kind of play in that sandbox and expose my friends and subsequently the characters that they play to this new world and new situation. And it really just... Tron and Tron Legacy, me and my wife were talking about this the other day, both feel like movies only Disney could make. But also they don't necessarily feel like Disney movies because, you know, like they do have like the happy ending or whatever, but also like Kevin Flynn, the main character, is very much a Buddhist Zen person. And which honestly I think might have been just because Jeff Bridges is Jeff Bridges and is a super Zen person.
Yeah.
And I incorporated that into I mean, he's the dude, so I think naturally the dude is going to show up in every single role that he plays.
Right.
But like, Tron very much were not safe bets, whereas like Disney, a lot of times, like with Marvel movies, they, you know, the early ones were kind of formulaic.
Yes.
And there are only so many ways you can make a Star Wars movie. And you know, there is like a formula to princess movies and Disney princess movies.
Yeah.
And all that. But it's still like, there is just this Disney feel to it without it being a
like
Disney
blatantly
movie.
Like Disney down your throat.
Right. Like bright colors and like things like that. Like Tron Legacy especially is like, in terms of like color palette and things like that, a very dark movie. Like a lot of it takes place at night and the colors are a little muted and things like that. And it's just really interesting to see a big company like that tell a story that does resonate with me and a bunch of other nerds and people like that. Because even in the score notes, Daft Punk says that a lot of how they made music was shaped by the score for the original Tron movie.
Oh, wow.
which was real. That one was really groundbreaking because it was the first score that incorporated synthesizers, period,
right,
in it. And the synthesizers do sound kind of hokey by today's standards, but also it was
but
like
that
one
was
of the first
very
major
on brand for the 80s.
Right. Like it very much suits the movie, and it's funny listening to it out of context. You're like, oh, that sounds kind of wonky, but then in the movie, you're like, oh yeah, it fits. It's perfect. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But also, it was the first female composer to score a major motion picture.
Oh wow, that's really
like
cool.
that. But then on top of that, Wendy Carlos was a trans person.
Oh wow.
Like she came out as
so
trans.
many revolutionary.
Yeah. In the 80s, when that wasn't super where neither of those things were super common, and then to do a groundbreaking score like that then inspired Daft Punk, who were a groundbreaking electronic dance duo. Like a lot of things we have in even pop music now were inspired by Daft Punk, and kind of the retro disco-ish 70s style we had for a bit came about because Daft Punk did a disco album in 2015.
Yeah. What a killer album.
It was amazing. I love it so much.
But going off of what I kind of just want to circle back to you saying, we talked a lot about like Disney escapism in this episode, but also in like previous episodes. But you brought up a really great point of like it discussing a lot of issues that you can see in your own life. Yeah. And I feel like that's one of Disney's strongest, how do I want to say this? One of Disney's strengths is putting those messages that you can resonate from in real life in their films and content just in general. And just like even, life lessons, yes, but also just struggles, and you see yourself and what you want to attain to be in these characters, but you also see very similar struggles. Like I know Joe's episode, she talked a lot about watching Frozen and seeing and resonating with the anxiety that Elsa goes through. Yeah. And so, and so I think that's probably one of Disney's biggest strengths is letting us have that escapism, but at the very same time, incorporating such humanizing lessons and characteristics in their characters where we watch it, especially as adults. I feel like I appreciate Disney content way more now as an adult than I did as a kid, because you can see yourself in characters like that. And like you were saying, just like the lessons of, some crazy things, a lot of relevant issues that we are still like talking about today. Right. In like this movie about, it's not just a movie about someone getting stuck in a computer. Right. There's so much more to it, and there's so many more takeaways to it that obviously makes you resonate with just, the world as a whole. And so I think that is one of Disney's superpowers, is just how to have that balancing act. Yeah. No, it really is. And I think another movie that kind of does that really well is Princess and the Frog. Where that movie. One, I don't feel like that one gets talked about enough. It's so good. Two, but it has like a practical, like a different take on the typical princess thing, because it very much is you have the Disney message of like your dreams can come true or whatever, but Princess and the Frog was like, yeah, your dreams can come true, but they're not just going to fall in your lap. You have to... You got to work for it. Work for it. You have to work for it. And I know even me, as like a teenage dude, when that movie came out, was like, yeah. Like, get it, Tiana. Get that, not bread, it would be beignets. Get that beignets. Get those beignets. Yeah. So that actually is the perfect segue. My two final questions. Typically, we have the final question about the basic, but I would love to know your favorite Disney princess. Okay. So this is kind of a loaded question. I'm ADHD and indecisive.
So
Okay.
I have like a
I respect
couple. I have a couple.
Okay.
So my all-time favorite, is Mulan. So yeah, it
Absolute queen.
is Mulan. She took matters in her own hands, didn't take stuff from anyone.
Yep.
And was not gonna wait on a man to save her. She was gonna like go do her
She
own
was gonna
thing.
be that man and do it
Right.
herself.
Right. And then just like take on everything, handle things herself, be who she was.
Yeah.
But also, my name is Phill, short for Philip. So there is a part of me.
I know where this is going.
You know exactly where this is going.
I know where this is going.
Who also claims Princess Aurora.
Yeah, she's queen too.
Because she has Prince Philip, and also I'm a little biased, but Prince Philip also was one of the only Disney princes in like the OG movies who did anything.
Yeah, I agree. Who actually had a personality.
Yeah,
and maybe that's because he carried a majority of the film. Because, Aurora was asleep for a good majority
that's
of the
whole
time.
That's the whole movie is she's asleep.
Yeah.
Which, is has like its caution flags.
Right.
These days. But like,
right.
Yeah, he did stuff. He took on a dragon, went through a thorny bush for a strange woman he danced with in the woods.
Once.
And also with a bunch of owls. Like it was.
No, I love that. So rounding it all out, we are a very welcoming space, as I hope you have felt today in your interview. And we like to celebrate the word basic, while other parts of the world think that that's a negative word. So I would love to know what the most basic thing you've ever done was.
All right. So first off, I think Disney is the perfect way to let your kind of inner basic out, because it is like escapism and all that. So I definitely agree with the positive take on basic in the context of Disney. That being said, I'm going to embarrass myself a bit. The most basic thing I've ever done was on that trip to Disney with my family after I graduated high school. We had my sister who was like perfect Disney princess age. And they snuck every single one of her Disney princess dresses, because she had all of them, like just so many of them, into our luggage for her to wear at the parks. So naturally, she's at that age where, of course, she's going to want to go see Disney princesses.
Yes.
And things like that. So the most basic thing I've ever done was I played I'm going to be a good big brother card. I'm going to go wait in line with her to go see these Disney princesses. I'm a mature dude, so it's not anything I want to do. But I'm going to be a good big brother and wait in line with her. And you know what? I want her to feel comfortable, so I'm going to take pictures with her too. And so there are a lot of pictures from that trip where I am with Disney princesses with my sister. Biggest smile on my face because I'm super happy, like especially with Mulan. Which props to that cast member who was doing it that day for giving me the biggest puff of ego ever. Like, we were there waiting to get our picture taken, and like I'm in the picture, just kind of part of it, and she's like, extend your arm like an emperor, please. And I was like, okay. And then I extend it, and she looks around, I'm like, okay. And then tag onto that story, my sister, who has very little filter and will admit this. We were at the China Pavilion, and we walk away. We go back to meet up with my parents, who, also like got their own pictures with it. And this honestly may be the most tact my sister has ever used. But she looked at us with full sincerity. Oh, I need to clarify. My sister is adopted from China.
Oh, okay, yeah,
So,
that's key
to
context.
clarify, this will fully reframe a lot of things.
That is a key part of the story for sure.
I completely forgot that part. Yeah, my sister was adopted from China. So
Okay,
she walks over with the most tact she has ever expressed and said, I don't think she was actually from China. And like full sincerity, like I don't know that she was disappointed or hurt by it as much as it was just a statement. And then sure enough, we looked back at the picture, we're like, oh yeah, that wasn't someone who looked like they were from China.
Oh no.
And that actually like helped shaped her experience. And like we went and saw Disney on Ice, and I think she also kind of said the same thing of like, we don't think Mulan there was Chinese. That shaped her because then she went on to figure skate. And
the story is taking so many twists and turns.
She went on to figure skate, and she figure skates competitively. She's actually at a competition this weekend. And one of her goals when she was younger, she was not always one of those ones that's like, yeah, I'm going to go to the Olympics and I'm going to win gold medals and all that. Like everybody always said, oh yeah, do you want to go to the Olympics? It's like, yeah, that'd be nice. Like very much that'd be nice. Cool. Yeah, that'd be pretty great. But when she was younger, her goal was she wanted to be an actual Asian American playing Mulan in Disney on Ice. And we were just like, oh, okay. But it kind of came about because the Mulan in the China pavilion that day at Epcot wasn't actually Chinese.
Oh my gosh. I hope your sister goes on to do that because that story is everything to me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There is one picture where I felt brave, and I think maybe my sister just didn't want to take it. We were at one of the character breakfasts, and it was like a princess character breakfast, so they all come around to your table, and they're like, oh yes, we'll send your autographs, we'll take your pictures, yada yada yada. And then on top of that, it was a delicious breakfast with Mickey waffles and everything. And Aurora came around, and Hope, my sister, was like, yeah, we signed the book. And so she signed it, and we're like, oh, do you want a picture with Aurora? And she was like, no. And I went, can I take a picture with Aurora?
It just so happens that I am Prince Philip.
and she was like, oh, have you slain any dragons today? I went, I don't know. There was that one at Downtown Disney made out of Legos. I looked at it kind of funny. So yeah, there is another picture somewhere.
I love that
in the digital void of me. And she also like did the arm thing, which, high school boy, I'm like,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure I made that exact sound even. And me and Princess Aurora. And yeah, so that is definitely the most basic thing I've ever done.
I love that. Character interactions are something that we will always celebrate over here. Yeah. They just bring me so much joy, even like especially as a kid and growing up, and even now as an adult. There's just something about like being close to some form of those characters that you have such an affinity for. But thank you so much for coming on the show today, Phill.
Thank you for having me.
I truly, truly loved this episode, just getting to chat more of like the sci-fi aspect of Disney and kind of touching on that. And I had so much fun on this episode today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And I apologize for filling up SD cards.
An SD card. Really quick though, before we leave, I would love for you to kind of plug like your social media that you would want the listeners to follow, or maybe a place where they can find your music.
Sure. I am not amazing at posting on social media. I do tend to be a lurker a little bit, and just kind of flipping through. Oh, hey, they're doing live. But you can find my music basically wherever you listen to your music at. Cool. Under Phill Kovac, and the spelling I'm sure is somewhere within the episode.
Yes. Yeah.
You just search for that and it'll be there.
Cool.
You can find me on Instagram, Phill_Kovac. Got in on that name early. And on Facebook, you can find me under Composer Phill Kovac. And on Twitter, you can find me at PhilCoMusic with a K. And I occasionally post things when I remember to.
Cool. Yeah, I'm horrible at Twitter, so I really relate to that. But everything, of course, for Phill will be linked in the description box down below if you're watching, or in the show notes if you are listening. And then I'm always pretty mindful to try and tag our guests in our social media posts. So if you don't follow us on Instagram, what are you doing with your life? Go give us a follow, and Phil's links will be there as well. So thank you again, Phill, for being on the show. It was so much fun with you today.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you for letting me ramble on.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to follow the pod and let me know what you thought of today's episode. All of our links are in the show notes and description box down below. And if you're listening to today's episode, please give us a rate and review, and don't forget to include your Instagram handle to be featured as our basic of the week. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I upload new episodes on Wednesday and other videos for more Magic Mondays. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Until then, Basics, stay magical.